Remember, and this is what was so fucking hilarious. This was the point that I made. I would encourage you guys to go look at my videos that I did on the Texas situation. Now, those of you that don't know, I live in Texas, have for the most part of my life, and because our electrical grid is not, it's still monopolized, just not by way of the federal government. In terms of its ultimate control, ERCOT is a statist institution by way of the Texas government and legislature. That's who they answer to. But because it wasn't attached to the larger electrical grids on either side, they say, well, that was the reason that we had this situation that we had this past latter half of the winter, where for a couple of days, some people went without power. A lot of them. I had more of rolling blackouts. It was aware what that means is that we'd have power and then we wouldn't have it. Then we had it and then we wouldn't have it. 30 minutes on, 45 minutes off type of situation is what we more so had here. And there were some people that never had any sort of issues. It wasn't like the entire state of Texas. Nonetheless, they didn't, whether it be with the government workers, and like the Bidens of the world, the people who are uber status and think of more further monopolization, centralization is more so the term that we're looking for here. They think that's a positive thing. They use that as an opportunity to say, ha, Texas, if you were on the other grid or connected to the other grids, you wouldn't have ever had any sort of problem like this. And I had said, and I would encourage you to go to look at those because there's a lot of myths surrounding that situation. I'm not going to sit up here and bore you to death. Go look at my videos. I did multiple long form videos going through the actual facts of not only what happened, but how the electrical grid works here in Texas anyway. But there are spots or pockets in the West Coast that deal with electrical issues all fucking, every year. That was bizarre that we didn't talk about that, or they didn't talk about that and didn't point to that. That would have, rolling blackouts or issues of having to try to conserve certain amounts of energy in order to try to not have a massive issue, let's say. And we're dealing right now with California again, which isn't new. California's electricity crisis is so bad, Gavin Newsom is ignoring carbon emissions policies to pay people to use generators. Come from Carlos Garcia. The electricity crisis in California is so bad, as mentioned before. It says a drought and the less than smooth transition from fossil fuels to green energy, which I've hated that term because they seem to leave nuclear out of that, is putting severe stress on the power grid among record high temperatures. California Governor Gavin Newsom, who is also under pressure from a recall election, signed an emergency declaration. It's just so crazy how these guys are so powerful where they can just sign declarations and orders to just fucking have things that happen that impact large swaths of people. This is amazing. Saturday, in order to address the power shortages and try to avoid rolling blackouts. The emergency measures include a provision that will pay some companies to use generators instead of relying on the power grid. So they're going to steal from the taxpayer, pay companies if you are using, let's say, a generator to incentivize you to use generators. The proclamation suspends certain permitting requirements to allow greater energy production and creates incentives so that large energy users can move back up power generation, freeing up energy capacity on the grid for everyone else during critical times when extreme heat events or interruption of transmission lines from wildfires or other causes threaten energy supply this summer. So what does this mean? Basically, they are saying that, yeah, we have all of these laws in place in terms of what kind of energy, or where rather we're going to get the energy from. California is arguably the worst in the country when it comes to like these emissions laws and what have you, basically suggesting that you can't even, because they're trying to transition to more what they deem as green energy. And now they're saying, okay, fuck all that. That's out the window. We don't have time for that. So we'll allow you to do this in order to try to avoid what could be a larger problem with the rolling blackouts, which they're probably going to get rolled. They get it all the time. They're probably going to have rolling blackouts yet again. According to an analysis by Bloomberg Opinion energy columnist Liam Denning, while 1 kilowatt hour of electricity produced by a backup generator uses about 1,300 BTU, while the same measure produced by a modern gas-fired power plant will only use about 7,000 BTU. The emergency measure will run through October, so through the summer, or through the end rather, and pay the large energy users $2 each kilowatt they avoid using by running their own backup generators. Denning points out that this is 14 times the average price that the industrial customers in California usually pay for each kilowatt. So they're paying them, and again, that's how the state works. They get to overpay for certain scenarios. But this whole idea is to incentivize them to do so. Bad planning combined with extreme weather has left California in a hole, Denning concluded. Set against the disruption caused by blackouts, paying the equivalent of $2,000 per megawatt hour to avoid them may seem relatively cheap. Still, it is remarkable that Newsom is now offering the state money to get businesses off the grid when needed. And like I've said before, this is still going to end up being a problem. It is every year for California for the most part, albeit in different pockets where they have these sorts of issues when it comes to rolling blackouts. But notice how this is probably news to a lot of you people. Now, remember, Texas couldn't stay the fuck out of the news because they thought that they were able to make a point about it. Meanwhile, every year, because this is my first year living in Texas that I'd ever even experienced that, right? That whole rolling blackout thing. So the one time that it happens, because the people claim, well, this happened in 2011, or no, it didn't. Not to this degree. It never happened in this state. That never happened. I lived in 2011 here in Texas. Never had I experienced what happened then. And even then, you had ERCOT having to ask the federal government, really for the same reason, to say, hey, can we say fuck these emissions laws so we can use our own fucking energy in order for us to try to avoid what could be a very disastrous situation when it comes to our energy. This is going to get buried. And when it does happen and they have these rolling blackouts among the other the electricity issues that they're having, it's going to be basically not talked about, though they're attached to the more federally controlled grids. They get to do that shit, and it's okay. But they thought they were making a point when it happened to Texas one fucking time. It goes to show how much bullshit this actually is. They don't care about being honest. This is why you're not going to hear about this as this happens. I'm going to cover it. I have to now. This wouldn't be a thing that I'd even be interested in covering had what not happened. More so the media fallout and how they're just your egregious coverage of what happened out here in Texas when it came to that grid situation and the fear-mongering doom and gloom bullshit. As if they act like everywhere else that's connected to the federal government's or rather the more federal, be it west or the east, and their controlled, operated, monopolized, controlled electrical grids are without issues when it comes to specifically what happened in Texas. Meanwhile, California deals with the shit every fucking year. It's amazing. You just watched a clip from my podcast, For Canon's Sake. Catch us live at 12 p.m. throughout the week over at youtube.com/YoungRipper59 and follow us over at odyssey.com/@YoungRipper59. If you want to watch the entire video cast after the show is over, just be sure to become a member on the YouTube channel. Of course, the full audio portion of the podcast is available for free on all major digital platforms, or just visit forcanonsake.com.